Welcome to the Real Estate Excellence Inner Circle exclusive live Q&A. I'm your host, Toni Patillo, and today we're unlocking valuable insights from some of the top minds in real estate. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting your journey, this session is designed to empower, enlighten, and inspire you every step of the way. Get ready for actionable advice, insider tips, and expert strategies that can elevate your real estate game no matter where you are in your journey. Let's dive in. Let's go. See you inside. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another exciting session of the Real Estate Excellence Inner Circle. And if this is your first time joining in, I want to welcome you. And, this is a space where real estate professionals, entrepreneurs, investors, thought leaders, they come here to connect. We come here to grow and really collaborate and really understand what's happening in the market for the various professionals that we're working with. So we're really happy to be back today. Today, we are diving into something very, very unique. And I'm so happy because a lot of times I've said over the years as a real estate broker, I often feel like I'm an attorney, but it's really an interesting role out here because we have to advise our clients accordingly. But as real estate professionals, if we don't have the license to practice law, then we've got to turn it over to a real estate attorney or an attorney that would be appropriate for their circumstances. So today, again, we are fortunate to unpack some of these issues that we address as real estate professionals and as realtors particularly. So I'm really honored that we've got our guest, Sara Naheedy. Is that correct? Is that how it is?
It's like Tahiti, but Naheedy. That's correct.
Naheedy. Okay, great. So Sara is both a real estate attorney and she's a licensed broker. So with more than 15 years of experience navigating transactions, mediations, arbitrations, and litigation, what sets her apart is not just her legal acumen, but her ability to lead with empathy, helping clients and professionals avoid legal landmines before they happen. That's the key. Avoid the landmines before they happen. So we're really, really excited to have you here today, Sara. And I'm going to let you bless us with an overview of how you got started, what led you into the law, what led you into real estate, etc. So welcome, Sara. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Toni, for allowing me to be here and to contribute to your incredible resource for our real estate professionals. I'm Sara Naheedy. I'm a real estate attorney and real estate broker. I come from a family full of physicians and engineers. And I quickly realized during my schooling in high school and college that my brain doesn't work in those types of ways. So there are no attorneys in my family, and I wanted to be a trailblazer and start something completely new. So I was always drawn to the law. I think the law is incredibly empowering, especially for females. And I wanted to help empower people by helping them be informed to make better decisions. So I knew when I was in law school that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, that I wanted to have my own business, but I knew that I needed to get experience first. So I started working for a property management company initially out of school. And then I worked on some big real estate litigation in Los Angeles County. And I knew I wanted to get experience, cut my teeth, and then eventually start my own business. So
Wow.
in 2013, I officially launched my own law firm, and it has been very exciting. Lots of ups and downs, and um, you know, navigating the world of having your own business by trial and error.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, trial and error. That's the key. We just do it and we get back up and keep doing it until
Absolutely.
we get it right. So
Absolutely.
thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. So tell me how you ended up in real estate. So you were working for the property management firm. At what point did you decide that you wanted to be a broker? Do you have a team that works with you as well?
I have a very small team. I don't have agents working under my broker's license, but I quickly realized when I started working in real estate law that this was really exciting. I love it. Every real estate transaction, every deal is different. And when I was exploring what was the common thread with people and how they became successful and how they built wealth. The
Yeah.
common factor was real estate. So I knew that this was something that was an incredibly powerful tool for people to build wealth, to create community, and to be able to um, offer people something significant. Your home is a very sacred space.
Hmm.
Real estate is a very personal um, and interesting journey for each house and each piece of property. So I quickly realized after I started working that my vision as my own business owner was to be a one-stop shop. So my vision was somebody could come to me, before a transaction happened, and then I could walk them through that process of buying and selling property from A to Z.
Hmm.
So at one point, a couple years ago, I was one of the owners of an escrow company. So truly, it was a one-stop shop where we're helping people before they get into the transaction, drafting the purchase agreement, going through the process of escrow, and then closing.
Hmm.
I think having your real estate license is a very powerful tool to empower people to build wealth.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's fantastic. That's very cool. So we're going to jump into some of the questions, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
That was powerful. That's a powerful intro and very personal and close to your heart, I can see. It's a passion for you. This is not just like a job or a thing that you go to generate your biweekly pay. This is your passion. This is your life, and it's because you care and you want to help people. At the end of the day, you're a servant. We're all servants. That's what I always
Yeah.
say to people.
We're
So
in the
we'll get into
service industry.
say that again.
We are in the service industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, in your experiences, what are the most common issues that you find in real estate contracts that end up in litigation? What or mediation or litigation? What are the most common things that present itself?
So that's a great question. And the number one reason why real estate professionals end up in litigation or being sued, especially for the agents, is a failure to disclose. So I cannot emphasize how important it is for an owner to disclose any known issues with the property, any material aspect of the property
Yeah.
you think you should disclose. I always tell my clients, disclose it. I get
Mhm.
clients that are like, oh, should I disclose that a water leak happened 20 years ago, even though it was completely remediated and we did the work, everything was done, and there's no issue? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Over disclose.
Yeah.
Not
Right.
disclosing an issue is the number one reason why people get in trouble in a real estate deal.
And that's what we've been taught from day one is disclose, disclose, disclose everything. So even things that the seller may not know, and we find out, we have to disclose.
Absolutely.
So
So if something comes to your attention as an agent that your client, the seller, did not tell you,
yeah,
it's still mandatory for you to disclose that.
right. That's right.
And if the seller does not want to disclose that, you need to have a conversation with your client and let
Yep.
them know that you are obligated to disclose this. And if they still choose not to do that, then you need to put something in writing to
Right.
cover yourself.
Cover it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. All right. So number two, what are some of the most misunderstood or overlooked clauses agents need to pay attention or pay closer attention to?
I think contingencies. Contingencies is one of the most important aspects of the residential purchase agreement. So not understanding what they are and how they protect your client can get you into
Right.
big trouble.
Yeah. You know, I notice now here in California, we've got more contingencies that have put into place because of different things. So you've obviously got your loan contingency, your appraisal contingency, your inspection contingency, your HOA contingencies that you've got to be able to review all those documents coming through HOA if it's applicable. And then you have now insurance contingencies. So
Yeah.
talk to me. This is not a question that anybody's asking. I just want to know from you, what is your experience with seeing how the insurance companies are dealing with people as it relates to the fires here in Southern California?
So that's a great question. And the homeowner insurance contingency is the newest one that we have in our residential purchase agreement in California. And that's an extremely important contingency in the last couple of years because, as we know, California has increasingly been faced with devastating fires. And insurance companies have up and left the state altogether. And
Mm,
so most lenders, I mean, pretty much all of them are going to require that you get homeowners insurance so that they can protect their interest. So it's not a question of if you should have that contingency in place for your client, but absolutely you need to because it's becoming difficult to get insurance as a home buyer. So if you cannot get insurance, you need to be protected and be able to recover your earnest money deposit.
that's right.
So a lot of times people, especially people in areas that were affected by the wildfires, they're not able to get the insurance coverage they need. So at the
Mm,
bare minimum, they get the FAIR plan, right? They get the government provided insurance, which is pennies on the dollar for the coverage that they really need.
yeah, yeah. So they're under covered.
They're underinsured, which is
They're underinsured.
a big risk.
Yeah. That's a scary thing, especially when you have a property that's is multi-million dollar property. Any property for that matter, no matter what it's worth. If you're underinsured, you're underinsured, and that's creates a problem when you have a disaster.
Absolutely. And I think that most people don't know that if you get homeowners insurance, it doesn't necessarily provide for fire coverage. So when you are shopping for your policy, you need to make sure that your homeowner's insurance provides coverage
Yeah,
for a natural disaster and fires in particular,
yeah.
because some insurance companies will carve that out as an exception
Uh-huh.
to a claim. So
Yeah,
even if you have to pay extra to get the coverage for fire and
yeah.
natural hazards like earthquakes or, floods.
So what you're suggesting is they get the additional coverage through their own warranty company, or is the home warranty basically covering their appliances and their and things like that.
Yeah, home warranty is going to cover appliances and what's inside of the house, but
Right.
my suggestion would be that when you are shopping for homeowners insurance, that you get coverage that will cover you in case there's a fire, because
Right.
it's not always included. And I think people think it's an automatic, and it's not.
Uh-huh. Mhm. Okay, that's good to know. Um, can you walk us through the types of contingencies that agents misuse or don't fully understand?
That's a great question. So, Tony, if I'm your client and I am only able to buy a new home if my current home gets sold, that's something that I need to communicate to you as my agent at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
Mm-hmm.
people, agents don't often understand that a person is not going to be able to buy their
Right.
future property if they're not able to sell their current property. So that's one I often see that gets underutilized or misutilized.
Yeah.
Um, having a loan contingency is very important if you're getting a loan.
Right.
That needs to be in place to protect you. Homeowners insurance, as we talked about, that's not an if, that's a must
Yeah.
nowadays, and how difficult the landscape is to get homeowners insurance.
Yeah.
Um, what else? Due diligence, right? Your inspection
Mm-hmm.
period.
Yeah.
17 days is the default under our contracts.
Uh-huh.
And that's a really important time frame for a home buyer, because that's the time where you order your property inspection report. That's the time that you're looking at your title report to make
Yeah.
sure that your property is free and clear of any liens or unknown issues. And that's the time that you need to investigate if there's an HOA involved. Is the HOA properly funded? Is there any litigation actively pending within the HOA or regarding the property?
Yeah.
So I think that, in the time of COVID,
Yeah.
2020, 2021, people were trying to be more competitive in their offers, and they weren't having any contingencies. And
Mm. Mm.
they were just saying, if you accept our deal, we're not going to have any contingencies. We'll move forward no matter what.
Wow.
And
Wow.
that's something that, in today's market is super risky. And I would never advise a potential buyer to do that.
Mhm.
But there was a time when that was normalized because it was so cutthroat and competitive that people would do that in order to get their offer accepted.
We have during these last fires, uh, the rental market went crazy as a result of the fires, and there were, you know, people going out just kind of in a rush to hurry up and uh, get a replacement property, and the insurance companies were giving them a lump sum of money. Some you could get a monthly payment, but most of them you could get a bulk payment to compensate you for the amount of months that you would need to be renting while your property is being rebuilt. Well, some of the what I experienced was that there were a lot of people who were offering a lot more than what the property was listed for, which created this surge in gouge in pricing. And many people thought it was the landlords or the property owners who were really the ones taking advantage of the moment. But actually, I experienced people who had lost their home in the fires. They would come for help to get replacement property as a rental, and they would double. Some people were doubling what the seller or the landlord was offering. So it then creates this surge. Anyway, that all had to come to a halt. I
Yeah,
want you to talk a little bit about that.
that was the market dictating, right? I
Mhm.
mean, like you said, people thought it was these greedy landlords and these greedy property owners who were saying, hey, yeah, pay double of what I was asking for before the fires. But like you said, Tony, I would see it a lot as, the renter coming in and saying, I know you have this property listed for $10,000 a month, but I'll pay you 20.
Yeah.
And people were calling me and saying, is that legal? Can I do that? And I was saying, listen, if you're the owner, you're the landlord, you can't ask for more than 10%.
Yeah.
But if you are the renter and you're trying to make sure that your offer gets accepted, yeah, you can offer and you can agree to pay,
Mm-hmm.
over market. But
Yeah.
the market itself at that time was creating that um, huge demand for rentals and skyrocketing the prices.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't necessarily the property owners who were asking for that or demanding that.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's seemed to have calmed down quite a bit now, especially since CAR, California Association of Realtors, got quite involved in quite a few other firms, real estate attorneys that jumped in and said, hey, you guys, this has got to calm down. And we understand you guys are desperate for housing. Some people, what I've encouraged people to do is to really get clarity around whether or not they really want to rebuild or do they want to repurchase somewhere else. So there's a lot of different things that are still transpiring. We're only 6 months away from the fires, so to speak.
Yeah. What were you seeing on your end? Were you seeing people unsure of what path they wanted to take, or were they intent on buying again?
I've seen them both. I've seen them both. And some people started out saying they were going to rebuild and they just wanted to focus on the rebuild. And then later they changed their mind and said, you know what, I don't want to, because it's hard. It's hard to look at your community and it's completely devastated. And there's a process of rebuilding and it
Yeah.
takes time. So if you are overseeing your construction, obviously you're going to have to be present while they're doing their thing. I don't know how that feels, when you have to look at the devastation around. And I'm not making either way right or wrong. It's a tough call because you think you may be able to handle it, but then when you get there and you start seeing this day after day, when you're checking in with your contractors and your workers, um, it just it's a sad thing,
It's a huge collective trauma. I can't even imagine having
Mhm.
everything you have just disappear.
Gone, just gone,
So
gone.
it takes a long time to process
Yeah.
that trauma and that grief and that chapter being completely closed and
Mhm.
creating a new vision and a new home. So I can't even imagine being faced with that and what people have dealt with and are continuing to deal with. But
Yeah.
when we saw the pictures, when we saw it, the videos, I mean, it looked like something from, Armageddon.
Yeah. Exactly.
It was
Oh,
unfathomable and
mhm.
unbelievable to see what we were witnessing live.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. It was. I don't want to relive it, but it was definitely a very intense time emotionally. And whenever you have people that there's things and then there's things, and it's not easy. If when you lose it, you don't realize it, and you're in a state of shock right, when it happens. So, and you remain in that state of shock. Who knows for how long? Some
Yeah.
people, it's much longer than others. So it just really depends.
Some people
Let's
to recover and it will take years. It will take
Yeah,
years
it will take
for
it will take
communities
years.
to rebuild and renew.
Yeah,
Yeah.
rebuild and renew. Yeah. So let's talk about what should agents be doing differently now when it comes to writing offers or presenting contracts. I remember, I've been in business a long time. I'm going to probably date myself, but I remember when we didn't even have computers, our offers weren't in WIN forms, or they weren't in the CAR forms, and we had to write contracts out. And sometimes we'd be right there in front of the property, and we'd write an offer on the hood of a car, and then we'd have duplicates. So we'd give one copy to the tenant or to the buyer, and then the other copy, the original is for the seller. And oh
The
my God,
carbon copy days.
yes.
I remember that. I was there.
So yeah, so tell me what we should be doing differently now when it comes to writing offers or presenting contracts.
So that's a great question. And in our post NAR settlement world, I think it's really important for agents to understand that we are in a service business. We are in a business where if you're not bringing value to your
Yeah,
clients, you're not going to stay in this business.
that's right.
So it's important to have a discussion with your client or potential client about what their goals are, what they're looking for. And now, as you know, Toni, you cannot, if I'm an agent representing a buyer, I cannot, sorry, if I'm a potential buyer
Yeah.
or looking to buy, I cannot go into an open house or view a house unless I have an agreement signed.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's very important to understand that you do have to have a representation agreement before you can go and view a property as a potential buyer. And it's
Yep.
very important to understand as a buyer that what you want to pay your agent is completely negotiable.
Mm-hmm.
So those are negotiation points as an agent you can use in your favor, and you can understand that the more you bring value, the more you can substantiate asking for 2%, 2.5%, 3%, whatever it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that, we are in a day and age where I have yet to see a buyer have to pay an agent their
Yeah.
commission, but I have heard stories
Yeah.
from, new homeowners that they had to pay for their commission to their agent.
Ah, interesting.
That shouldn't be happening, in my opinion, right? Like
Yeah.
the seller should be agreeing to pay a
Yeah.
buyer's agent their compensation through their commission.
Yeah. It's a very controversial subject. And, in commercial, as you probably know, in commercial, it's very common for the buyer to pay their agent. Okay. And the seller is not paying, he's only paying their own agent. The seller pays their own agent, and the buyers pay their agent in commercial. That's very common. But in residential, it's very uncommon to have the buyer's agent pay the buyer, or excuse me, the buyers to pay their buyer's agent, because it's been customary that the seller pays the commission, and the listing agent who's running the show is going to split that commission in some sort of fashion. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean it has to be a 50-50 split, but the listing agent is the broker. Let's say the listing broker is who is going to be responsible for paying that commission. Now, in my opinion, the only thing that's really different today, and I always explain to my buyers, you have to set the expectation up front. But I always explain to them that the seller does not have to pay the buyer's agent. So there could be a concession that you will have to agree to pay the buyer's agent. Um, However, I suggest to my sellers who I'm working with that it would be more beneficial for you to be open to a concession than for you to not have the concession in place.
Agreed.
And that just closes the door to how many people are going to show your unit or your property.
Yeah.
So I'm with you on that.
Yeah. If you're a seller and you're not willing to offer a buyer's agent's commission, you're shooting yourself in the foot, and you're not allowing for as many opportunities by drawing that line
Yeah,
and putting your foot down.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, okay, so what can agents better manage the timeline of a transaction to avoid falling into a breach or a default? What kind of how can they better manage the timeline on the consent? You know what's interesting? The timeline, depending upon which escrow company you're with, you know, the escrow companies will also lay out your timeline for you, and they'll put the contingency and the dates due based on the approval, which I think is very smart, and it's also very convenient for us to be able to readily access these dates.
Agreed.
So um, how can agents better manage the timeline of the transaction to avoid falling into these breaches or defaults?
So like you said, Tony, work with an escrow company that's
Yeah.
going to be your partner in the
Yes.
transaction, that is
Yes.
going to give you the detailed timeline and remind you, hey, on such and such date, you have to provide, the seller has to provide the disclosures on such and such date. You have to remove your contingencies as the buyer.
Yeah.
Um, so it's important to work with an escrow company that is technology forward and is going to be
Yeah.
your partner in the transaction. It's important as an agent to have a transaction coordinator.
Okay.
Everybody needs an assistant or a helper who's going to manage the timeline.
Yeah.
As you know better than anybody, Tony, there are strict timelines,
Yeah.
and they're pretty fast moving in
Yep.
transactions. They can be,
Oh,
um,
they can be very fast moving. They
especially
are very fast moving.
shorter escrow periods, right?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
it's 30 days or less, those dates come
Hmm.
up quickly. So
Yep.
have a calendar, right? Calendaring the dates,
Hmm.
having the conversation with the client, explaining, on this date, we're doing this. On the next important date is this date where you have to remove your contingencies. The next important date is the closing date, whatever it is, but have a calendar,
Have a calendar for
have a
sure.
discussion with the client on what does the timeline look like and what are the important dates and who does what by when,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
It's
Like,
it's
let's
very important.
ask ourselves, who does what by when?
Yeah. You know, and I'll tell you something that I've recognized over the 25 years now of being in this industry. The There's some escrow companies that just do not do the timeline thing, right? If you have an escrow company that refuses to do the timeline, then you have a TC or you have somebody on your team. And if it's just you, then you need to do the timeline for
Mhm.
sure. Um, I was looking at the next question here, and what are your go-to practices when reviewing a deal uh, to make sure that your clients and you are protected?
That's a great question. So I have buyer and seller checklists where
Mm,
I give to my clients that gives them
okay.
a broad overview of what needs to be looked at and what's important.
Yeah.
Uh, but the very first thing I do in any deal is pull a title report.
There you go. There you go.
That's my first step. I need to pull the title report. I need to see, what's the history of the transaction? What are the liens on the property? Are the taxes up to date? That's my very first step in any client and any transaction I ever work on.
You know, it's funny. Oh, just before I asked you that, I was just trying to pull it out of my brain, but I was going to talk about that title. When I sit with the seller before we even list the property, I've already pulled the prelim.
Yep.
I make it a practice as a listing specialist to pull the prelim when I'm interviewing for the job.
Mm-hmm.
That way, I know. what's on the title, and I can ask questions as we're talking about listing their property and what's most effective. So this way, I'm heads now. This is going to depend on your relationship with your title company. If you have a really great relationship with your title company, and this is why it's important to build a relationship, they know your methods to your, getting prepared to list a property. And they know if you have a good relationship with them, that they're not going to have a problem with pulling the prelim. I know that it costs money for them. I know that it costs money for them to do the prelim, but I'd rather be prepared. And as soon as you get a buyer on board, that's the first thing I hand them. Here's the prelim, right? Here's the prelim. And by the way, I encourage the sellers to get a inspection, get a pre-sale inspection.
Yes.
This way, I know, and I pay for those pre-sale inspections all the time because the sellers don't want to spend the money. Some don't, which I discourage that. I say know what you're dealing with up front. That way we can be clear about our pricing and all these other things.
That's a
So
great idea and great suggestion, and I highly recommend that, encourage that as well.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to say, what is your take on sellers getting pre-sale inspections and agents ordering the prelim right out of the gate so that you know what you're dealing with?
Yeah, I agree, because if you're a seller and you do your own property inspection,
Yeah.
you are very familiar with what needs to be done
Yep.
on the property and what are the points of negotiation the buyer is going to present to you.
Exactly.
So you're either, as a seller, going to look at your inspection report that you paid for and
Yep.
say, what am I going to fix up? What am I going to fix on the property in order to get it ready to be listed? Or if
Right.
I'm not in that position, or if that's not something I'm willing to do, what am I aware of that the buyer is going to ask as a request for repair or
Right.
monetary concession?
Right. Yeah.
So you're doing all of the work at the front end and you're setting the expectation. But back to your original question, what do you do to get prepared for any transaction? If you're the agent, you're sitting down with your client and understanding what is important to them.
Right.
What are their goals? What's important to them? What is must-haves versus want versus, pie in the sky, delusional, but
Mhm.
you're taking the time to interview your client and understand what
Yeah.
they and how you can help them
Yeah.
instead of pushing your agenda on them.
Yes.
Sometimes I see agents
Exactly.
who are like, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to spend $100,000 just to get it ready. Not everybody wants to do that. So
Right.
if your client doesn't want to do that, you can't push that on them.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
do have to prepare them for the fact that the buyer will come to the table and ask for concessions. And
Yeah.
that will be a point of negotiation.
Mhm. Mhm. That is a point of negotiation. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So these are great. These are good, good, good. We're getting great value for our listeners and our members, and thank you, thank you. We've
Thank
got
you.
a few.
You've prepared great questions from your
Oh,
audience or whoever, prepared these questions. These are really great questions.
cool. Very cool. So, how do you use empathy and psychology to support your clients through stressful, high stake transactions?
So, as you know, Tony, we are therapists. Right.
Thanks.
Our
Yeah.
first and foremost job in representing clients is we are their real estate therapist.
Yeah.
So, leading with empathy is really important to me. I want to be very cognizant and aware of what are the emotions surrounding the transaction for my client. What are the pain points? What are the things that are really going to bring them joy? And
Yeah.
I don't know if people understand, unless you've been through it, how emotional buying and selling a house is.
Very emotional.
Very, very emotional. So if you are in tune with psychology and understanding people's psychological background and story
Yeah.
around money, around a house, that's a really powerful tool that can bring a tremendous value when representing a client in a transaction. So I
Yep.
think being a great listener, I'm sure you know
Yep.
that you are a great listener, Toni. That's a really important skill in representing clients. Being a great listener and being open-minded and being able to provide feedback and
Wow.
important
Yep.
advice needed.
Yep. Yep. Very, very, very on point. That is exactly correct. It's developing that relationship, and the key is listening. When you listen, all your answers, most of your questions will be answered
Yep.
if you're listening. But you've got to shut up and listen and
Mhm.
just let them, because eventually they tell you everything you need to know about the property, about themselves, about their family,
Their life. Yeah, you
about their life. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
and you've got to be compassionate with that. This is the business. We are servants, like you said. We're
Mhm.
servants, and so we're here to serve you. We're here to comfort you. We're here to embrace you, and we're here to get you through the process. We're here to bring you information and options. Okay,
Yeah.
so
I'm
it's
sure
not
you
all.
sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sure you know that, buying and selling real estate, buying your home, selling your home, it's one of the most stressful times of your life. So
that's right.
you are there to alleviate that stress, understand what will stress them out beforehand
Yep,
and get ahead of it
yep.
and guide them through this very stressful and intense process where there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of decisions to be made, a lot of nuances and details, and you're the guide.
Mm, yep. You are the guide. And there's a fine line here. I'm going to say this because we are with you, the attorney who understands the logistics and the legality. We have to be very careful about uh, offering our opinion on legally related things and or financially related things. And at the same time, like you say, we are a therapist, we're listeners, and we're here to guide you and help you. But there are certain things we have to make super clear that we cannot answer. We cannot answer tax related questions. We cannot answer legal related questions. So it's important to be able to establish that those borders, if you would, right out of the gate. Here's who I am and here's who I'm not. Okay. I hear legal stuff all the time. I could probably answer some of those questions, but I won't put myself in that position anymore. You know,
So
I
what do you do when a client asks you for legal advice or a question that's outside of your scope of services?
expertise.
How do you
Mhm.
direct them?
Well, I have a roster, and these are vetted resources that we've kept over the years. So we have a roster of professionals from every industry you can imagine that we have personally worked with and that we can, to a certain degree,
Vouch.
edify or vouch for, right? So I like to give them three options for inspectors, three options for um, all the different types of representation that you can imagine. And in the 50 plus market, we have to defer to people who have expertise in the 50 plus market. And there are lots of attorneys. There's elder law attorneys. There's family planning attorneys. There's all kinds of estate planners and different types of attorneys that all I know of one firm that actually has a financial division and it's a legal division, and they're together. Um, and so what their clients may have questions from a legal perspective, but then they've also got the right hand there that's ready to answer their questions and to give them guidance on financial concerns. So, there's an expert in every little area, and so it's best to stay with the professionals,
Yeah.
right? And we, as the realtor that's pretty closely knitted with them, are the ones that have to set the expectations and have to keep those rounds straight.
Yeah, and you're like the quarterback, right? I mean, they're looking to you for guidance. Like they want you to be able to give them a list of vendors, to give them a list of professionals that you trust.
Yeah,
So once you become the trusted professional, trusted agent, they're going to ask you for everything. Hey, Toni, I
that's
need a
right.
CPA. Like I don't know I need to figure out like what's my tax liability.
Right.
And people ask me that question and I say, I'm not a CPA, I'm not a tax attorney, but there's a great
Yeah.
CPA or tax attorney that you can talk to,
Yes.
and we
Yeah.
become that trusted go-to source when our clients
Yes.
do have needs of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important that you have these resources in your back pocket.
Yep.
You know, when in not every referral, you have to pair them up
With
because not
unique
everybody's.
personalities.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
So I'm not going to put Joe Blow over here with Susie G, who they don't speak the same language. There's all of these things that are different. So you really have to look at it and determine whether or not this could be a good fit.
Yeah. We're
Mhm.
matchmakers too.
Yeah, we're matchmakers. Exactly. We are matchmakers.
We
So
are in the business
it's
of matchmaking. Just a
exactly
not the love kind, just a different kind.
different kind. That's true.
Yeah.
So you probably we've probably already answered this, but I'm going to read out the question anyway. When should an agent involve a real estate attorney in a deal? Now, I think this is perfect timing because there's a lot of scenarios when you should probably involve an agent, an
So,
attorney.
seller financing is a big one. Uh,
Yep.
due to the interest rates being a little higher these days than they were a couple of years ago, I'm seeing a lot more seller financing. And so when you have a client that has a deal that involves seller financing, I'm the perfect person to go to. I regularly handle preparing deeds of trust and promissory notes and accomplishing that for my clients. Call me when, you're buying a piece of real estate and it's not with your spouse, right? It's
Right.
with your family member or you're a couple and you're not married, you're buying a house together, you need an agreement in place that protects
Yeah.
you and makes
Yeah.
it crystal clear what are the obligations each one of you has and what happens if, God forbid, you break
Mhm. Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Also call me when, you have somebody who's got a landlord-tenant issue, or somebody is using a lease that they pulled off the internet, right?
Right.
These
Oh
are
my God.
Yeah, these are no-nos and
Those are big nightmares we see a lot. I just got one yesterday where it was not even in the real estate business. It was in the car business. And somebody posted they stole a car from an enterprise rental lot. They stole a car. And then they advertised it on Craigslist as a car for sale. And then these people ended up buying the car,
a stolen car.
stolen car, all cash. They paid. And they met this person, paid them the cash. They drove off with their car, and then suddenly, the you know, they've somehow discovered that they bought a stolen car with all their cash, which is now gone. So there's a lot of stuff, crazy stuff
Yeah,
out
there's
there.
a lot of crazy fraudsters out there. You can't be too careful. So work with a professional who is going to do their investigation and due diligence to protect you.
I think that is so important that we express that. And I'm so glad that you cover these areas that you spoke of.
Yeah.
Um,
Don't go it
because
alone. Don't
don't go
sell
it
your
alone.
house yourself. Don't represent yourself as a buyer.
Yeah,
People think they're going to save a lot of money. You might save some money, but you're going to end up with potential headaches and legal nightmares in the future.
yeah, yeah. No question. No question. Um, what are the top three things that agents need to keep in mind when representing someone brand new to the process? What are the top three things that agents need to keep them, you know,
So,
to keep in mind when representing somebody that's brand new?
so when you're dealing with a first-time home buyer, there's a lot of trepidation, there's a lot of emotion, heightened emotion around the transaction. You should try to focus on being an educator, educating your clients, understanding what their budget is, um, making sure your clients are pre-approved. So, you don't want to waste anybody's time. If you're working with a first-time home buyer, make sure
Yeah,
that person gets pre-approval. Make sure that person speaks to a lender to understand how much house they can afford.
right.
You
Yeah,
know, get a checklist for them. Make it as seamless as possible and, educate and communicate everything to them and keep everything in writing. I mean, people often forget when it comes to real estate, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. Everything related to real estate must be in writing. So just because an listing agent made a verbal deal to you that the washer and dryer was included, guess what? That doesn't exist unless it's in the contract. So, working with first-time home buyers is a emotional process, and the best thing you can do as an agent working with first-time home buyers is educating them, keeping them informed, keeping that open communication, making sure they're pre-approved, and understanding what's their budget
right.
and what's most important to them. What are the must-haves versus the wants?
Yep, absolutely. You know, it's good we're talking about this because a lot of times the buyers will be out shopping before they even know what they qualify for if they're buying with a loan.
And
Okay.
that's a waste of time. It's a waste of time for everybody.
It's interesting because if you see something you like and you can't pull the trigger because you don't know, you haven't started your pre-approval. So I highly, highly, highly encourage agents who are representing anybody, whether they're new or seasoned investors. Make sure that you know their financial situation, period.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I won't use names, but I've had cases where the seller wanted to sell to buy down and downsize and move into other, they're empty nesters now, and they're also divorced, and they're also, but they they didn't do. I was coaching an agent. I am coaching an agent through this process as we speak. You have to know. You have to know what their financial situation is before you can even attempt to serve them. If I got to know that once we sell this property and you go off, we identify the replacement property. I got to know that you can afford the replacement property and that there's funds there, blah, blah, blah. Especially, I specialize working with the 50 plus market, especially when you're working with the seniors.
Yeah.
Seniors have a tendency to be very private. They don't want to tell their business. They don't like to put their business out there. But at the end of the day, it is critical that you know what financial position they're in so that they can perform or not. And
Yeah.
if they have to sell, if it needs to be contingent upon the sale, or if it doesn't need to. Some people are able to sell, and I just closed a deal where the lady didn't have to make it a contingency to sell her property. She was able to rent her property out and go forward with her purchase. So again, it is key to understand what their financials are
Yeah,
before
I'm
you
sure.
start working with them, right?
I'm sure you coach your agents and know personally that you're not going to work with somebody unless and until they've spoken to a lender and they
Yeah,
are pre-approved, right? I mean, that's just a best practice
yeah,
for any agent.
yeah, yeah. There's those few things that I say get that done first.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it is a waste of your time.
Yeah,
Uh,
you're wasting everyone's time.
and everyone, it's a waste of everyone's time. And I know there are buyers that like to get out and see what's in the market, and they kind of, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine.
Yeah,
But when we start talking about really seriously looking to pull the trigger, the first thing you need to do is get your pre-approval or your full approval or whatever it is. And if you're not financing, then have your proof of funds ready to
exactly.
reveal, you know? So,
If you're a cash buyer, get that information readily available for your agent so that there's no
yeah,
question or issue that you
yeah,
are qualified.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, let's see here. I'm not sure I understand this question. Uh, how can agents avoid legal trouble while still being fierce advocates to their clients or their clients?
So I think as an agent, you can be a fierce advocate and you can do a great job. And the best way you can do that is being really good at your profession. So if you're constantly keeping up to date with what's going on in the market, if you're taking continuing education, if you're attending, sessions like this, if you're a student of your profession and you're constantly learning, you are going to be a fierce advocate and you're going to do a great job for your clients.
Yeah,
But where you don't want to get into a situation is practicing law, giving legal advice, giving tax advice, or opining on something that's really outside of your expertise. So people ask me questions all the time, and if I don't know, and if I'm not the person, I'll say that's a great question, and I have no idea. I'm not the person who knows that, but I can refer you to somebody who does. So I know we want to kind of be the go-to
yeah,
person for everything for our clients, but it's important to know what you don't know and make
that's
sure
right.
you're not giving advice about something that you have no knowledge and experience of.
Very, very sound advice. If you don't know it, just say that I don't know, but I'm going to refer you to somebody who does.
I'll find somebody who does. I'll find out for you.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. This has been a really, really awesome. I am going to present a question that's not necessarily on our list, but I know that a lot of agents, you're here in Southern California, and it's not just Southern California. I think our industry is experiencing some things right now, and a lot of agents are operating out of fear. A lot of consumers are. Um, I would love to get your intake on where you think we're at this moment in the market, and why. I want to say what, why, and when, and where do you think it's going?
So I was reading an article the other day, and it was about how the DOJ and society as a whole thinks that real estate agents make too much money.
Mm,
That was a big motivation for the NAR lawsuit that we know all too well. I think that in the post NAR world, as professionals, real estate professionals, we are now faced with what is the value we're bringing to the client? And if you're not bringing value to the client because you maybe do one deal a year, and this is not even your profession, this is not what you do, those people will weed themselves out. But if you are bringing value, if this is your passion, if this is what you do day in and day out, you are valuable and you are going to prove your value, and you're not going to have to fight for a client to see that you're worth whatever commission rate you would like to charge. But I think in this post-NAR world, a lot of people in our industry will self-select out, and they will be weeded out of the business of real estate because their heart's not really in it, and this is not really what they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I see that, the commission structure gets compressed, right? We used to have like 6, 7, 8% commissions, and now it's, maybe 5, 6, or 7.
Right.
I think people are starting to understand this is all negotiable. So if I am bringing value to my client and I am doing a great job, the client is not going to push back and try to
Right.
negotiate with me. They're going to understand what I'm bringing to the table. So make yourself valuable, keep up to date, know your stuff, and you don't have a problem. But if you're somebody who's doing one deal a year and you don't even know what's really going on, then you're not going to be doing
Mm-hmm.
longer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very very important thing to understand is value. What value do you bring to the client? And I think that's the most important thing in our industry today is what value add do you have?
Exactly.
And how can you make yourself more valuable to the consumer? So, and niche business. I've never been in real estate part time, and I've never understood how you can be in business part time. I know there's a lot of people who have regular jobs, which is great, and then they want to do real estate part time. But it depends on how you want to do it. I mean, what are you looking to do? Because our business is like, anything is subject to change at any moment, and then anybody is subject to request a showing at any moment. So uh, there are a lot of things that are time related, and I don't know that you have that much flexibility when you're doing a job and working real estate. What
Yeah.
has been your observation of that
Yeah, I agree with you.
as a broker?
Our
As a
industry
broker,
is super time sensitive. And like you said, it's 24/7, right? So if you have a client that wants to see a property at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday night,
yep,
and you're still doing your 9 to 5 or your, nighttime shift and you can't do it, it's going to make it more difficult to do that. And I think those people self-select out.
yep,
So I just think in order to do something well, you have to be fully invested and make it your obsession, right?
yep.
You constantly want to improve and learn and be better.
Awesome. Awesome. So, Sarah, tell us, is there anything else that you'd like to leave us with? This has been an amazing conversation, and I'm really, really um, grateful to meet you, and I want to do business with you. I want to help you help your clients, and vice versa. I know there's things that you can do for our clients as well.
I would love
So,
that. And I want to say thank you so much to you, Toni, and your team for reaching out to me for inviting me to do this and be a speaker here. And, I'd love to do any future speaking engagements or classes or collaborate with you and your team and work with your team. I'm looking forward to that. And just want to say thank you for the opportunity. And it's so lovely to connect with you and know you. And thank you.
thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for making yourself available. Thank you for being such a resource here because your knowledge in law and your knowledge as a broker, real estate broker, is invaluable. And that's invaluable. When I say that, that's powerful because we have always, as realtors and as real estate brokers, we know that we sit on a fine line of being advisors. We're advisors, but we're not attorneys, but we sometimes the role that we play is very, we're dealing with contracts all day long. So it's important to have an attorney colleague who is also in the same line of business as we are.
Yeah, I would love
Because
to be a resource for you, your agents, your clients. Anytime you have questions,
yeah,
need anything, please reach out.
great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who joined in with us today. This has been a real enlightening session. Oh, we've created the Real Estate Excellence Inner Circle so that we can continue to learn and continue to collaborate and continue to hear about what everybody's doing in this industry. So be sure to stay engaged and watch the replay. We'll have a replay going. You'll be able to have your own copies of this as well. And my editor will, if you need it chopped up, he can chop it up. Or if you want to have your person chop it up and use it in your social media,
Yeah.
that will, we're totally fine with all of that. So, yeah, so keep showing up for the knowledge, you guys. We thank you. And again, Sarah will be in touch and we'll do some things together. Okay.
Looking forward to it. Have a great day, everyone.
Yeah, you guys too. Have a great day. Thank you for chiming in. That wraps up another Real Estate Excellence Inner Circle exclusive live Q&A. I'm Toni Patillo, and I hope today's session gave you the insights, strategies, and inspiration to take your real estate journey to the next level. A huge thank you to our amazing guest and, of course, to all of you for tuning in and being a part of this incredible community. If you found value today, don't forget to like, share, and stay connected, because the Real Estate Excellence Inner Circle is all about growing together. Until next time, keep pushing forward, stay inspired, and remember, you've got what it takes to succeed in this business. See you soon. Take care and keep on thriving.